Couple just general comments. First of all, some of you may be watching this later on through YouTube, so we're glad that you are joining us also. My name is Andrew Snavely. I'm the development coordinator here. Just try to help with event planning. Events like this, really meaningful times that we can spend learning from those who used to be students and have now graduated and moved on. And I'm joined by two young men here, and then Mrs. JP's in the background doing tech stuff. So if you want to say hi to Miss JP in the Q&A, she would love that. Anyway, I'm going to pray for us here to start out with, and then our goal for today is to hear from Gabe and David. I'll introduce them in a moment and let them get a chance to share more of their experiences. And we have a poll for those of you who are joining us, a lot of things, but let me pray to start our time out together here. God of heaven, thank you for your wisdom in designing this world, creating us, giving us life, allowing us to be alive here now. In your providence and your wisdom, you want us to learn together during a simple session like this. Thank you for this small school on Murray Street. We're not huge, we're not fancy, but we are devoted to you, and we have really seen your blessing for many decades. And today we want to rehearse what you are doing in the lives of some of our grads. And we also pray that you would help us to grow more in wisdom because of what they share from their experiences. Thank you for your grace, and we ask your blessing on this time. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I have a poll I'm going to share right now. So those of you watching, you have a chance to answer two questions for us. One question you already answered last week when we asked you about different topics in high school. So what high school topic are you most curious about, right? The academic side of it, extracurriculars, the friend stuff, spiritual challenges, maybe life skills. And then also the second question asks, what are you most interested in? Where do you see yourself heading in a career, right? You see yourself working with people, some kind of communication, social work, ministry, teaching, politics, maybe technology, art of some kind, performance art. Maybe you really enjoy working with things and getting your hands dirty. And so you see yourself in construction or engineering, transportation. All right, great. So we're having several come in, and as we do, I'm seeing these results. I think panelists, you're able to see these results with us as well and see these things. So we have an idea as we kind of share what we can focus on and how we can really address your concerns. Great. Thank you guys for sharing these answers with us. I'll leave the panel. I think the panelists can look it up on their side as well. Here, let's share the results, see what everybody thinks. All right, so everybody's interested in everything. It's pretty evenly spread out, a little bit less the spiritual challenges, but still 5 people are curious about that. How do I defend my faith? And then career fields are pretty spread out as well. Technology edges out, performance or art. The people industries are pretty broad, so a lot of categories could fit under there. All right, thank you guys for letting us get a sense of where you're coming from. I'm going to introduce David Yu. David is a sophomore now at Townsend Harris. He graduated from our school, class of 2019, a whole 2 years ago. But it was 2019 is before 2020, so it was pre-COVID. And so David's experience of FCS was what has been the experience for most of our students. Now he's over in Townsend Harris. Let me just hear from you, David. What has it been like with the COVID experience there in your high school? What adjustments have they made? Well, have they even talked about what next year could look like, perhaps?
So far as I know, next year is going to be all in person. Basically, this year was very isolated. It was all remote. There was not as much socialization, especially lack of participation in classes from students, and a lot of cameras were off. I mean, quite understandably so.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that. You also experienced Townsend Harris last year as a freshman, so you probably had a pretty big contrast in your mind. What was it like last year in the normal setup there in your freshman year?
Much more active than in COVID. Participation in classes was up. It was much more motivation, much more extracurriculars, especially in-person activities.
Okay, great. And we'll look forward to hearing from you some more as you think back to your time at FCS, what you remembered. I'm going to have Gabe Gann join us. Gabe is right now at home, I suppose, but he is also a freshman finishing his second semester at Boston University. And he graduated a few years before David, class of 2016. And Gabe, I know it's interesting hearing you talk through when you thought about high school, what high school you would attend. Can you kind of talk us through that journey and what led you where you ended up?
Okay, so for some background context, I lived in New York City, so I applied to the New York City high schools. But my eighth grade, I moved out to Long Island. I moved to Great Neck, and the Great Neck schools the zone schools are pretty good. I'd say not quite on the level of like Stuyvesant or Townsend Harris, but comparable. So what ended up happening is I got into Townsend Harris, and I had a family member that still lived in New York City, so I could have gone to the Townsend Harris schools. But I talked it over with one of my teachers. I don't know if some of the students may know, Miss Perkowski. I had her second and third grade, and I always talked with her throughout middle school, and I was always close with her, and she holds a special place in my heart. So I talked it over with her, and she was actually doing some research for her kids, and she told me that that educationally the schools are comparable. They are very good schools educationally, and that if I went to Townsend Harris, I would either have to like live with my like I wouldn't be living with my parents or my little brother, or I'd have to commute, and it would be maybe an hour or two out of my day that I just spend commuting. So I decided to go to Great Neck, the Great Neck schools, and I don't regret it. I had a lot of special opportunities that were at that school only, in performing arts that I wouldn't have gotten if I went to Townsend Harris.
And that's helpful to hear you share that. So, you have one opportunity that presents itself, a really good opportunity. Then you have to factor in not just is it a good high school, but how long do I travel to get there? And if there are other closer high schools, are they pretty close to it, right? Comparable, it compares close to it. So if that's the case, you know what? All things considered, maybe the closer school is a good option. Not saying that's obviously a decision that everybody makes, but it was neat that you had to sort through that. And I wonder if any of our attendees, those who are watching us, if you guys remember Miss Perkowski, Miss P, did anybody have Miss P for third grade? Probably not. I think she left before our eighth graders would have been in third grade. Maybe then give a little chat shout out and see if they remember Mrs. P or not. They do. Okay. So I'm seeing seventh, eighth graders do remember Miss P. So it's cool, Gabe. You're in eighth grade. You're like, I have a big decision to make. Let me talk to my third grade teacher. I appreciate that. You had that close connection with her. And so she was really influential with you. And we'll give a shout out to Miss P. Maybe she'll watch us on YouTube someday and she'll say and make her smile a little bit. That's awesome. David, in your case, I guess you were traveling. What was the commute like for you going back and forth to high school?
It was very short. I think 10 minutes maximum, which was pretty much half the time it took for me to commute to FCS. So it was a very, very good choice.
Great. And then did you travel by bus, by train? I think our students would be curious how you got there.
I was fortunate enough to have my mom drive me.
All right. Well, there you go. That's good. What do you remember the percentage of students who travel? How many are dropped off? How many kind of take mass transit of some kind on their own? Again, this is pre-COVID, so it may look different now, but what was the kind of ratio, if you can remember?
Majority took public transportation, but there's like a good percentage that take it by car.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe it'd be interesting to hear from Gabe. I know, Gabe, in your experience, you're coming out of a Christian school. You're heading into a school that's not Christian. A lot of dynamics, what that was like. How did you kind of sort through that, making friends, in your mind, being pretty settled what you believe, but also showing respect and interacting with other people? What was it like for you?
So I think one of the big things I was worried about from going from FCS to a secular high school was like you always hear stories of people getting attacked for their faith. And throughout my years in high school, most people were, I don't think I've ever gotten attacked. So I think something I learned from church was they wanted, along with my preparation in FCS, is they wanted you to be able to defend your own faith. as long as you're able to justify your faith for yourself, it becomes very, not easy, but it's a lot easier for you to like not stray from Christianity, I think. And also a good aspect of that is finding Christian friends, whether it be through your church youth group or even at school through your Christian club. I think it's a very good thing to be around other Christian people. And I'm not saying that all your friends should be Christian, but just have some close friends that are.
And I guess that's a good point to make, right? When you're going in that setting, God calls us to be a representative for him, right? If we go in thinking God wants me to, share the gospel with every single person in the school the first day, or I gotta convert everybody, that's a huge complex to put ourselves. We want to follow the Lord. We want to be willing to speak out. And often, if you have 4 years in the same place, you're going to be developing friendships and relationships, and hopefully, as your faith is important to you, that would come up in conversation. So we'll see that materialize. But it's a good point, Gabe, to sort through what is my mission here. My mission is to know what I believe and be strong about that. That's really helpful, definitely. David, I know you've done some extracurricular stuff. What have you found to keep yourself occupied? I have a feeling you're not twiddling your thumbs too much. What have you been involved in besides the classes themselves?
Definitely robotics. Robotics is pretty much a full-time job, as you may put it. Especially in build season, you probably will have to stay at school until midnight to finish building the robot, especially with the very tight time constraints that they give you. Not only that, you have to take inventory, which is counting the parts and the tools and everything else to prepare for next year, and as well as training the rookies, the freshmen that come in.
So robotics has taken a lot of time. What are the other options available to high school students, though, besides robotics? I know there are clubs, right? Different clubs or electives you could jump in on it.
Yeah, there are a lot of electives. Art and music were offered for freshmen. Only 2 of them, I believe. Other clubs would be Sirely, which is very, very popular. It's like a research type of club. There are many other music clubs, humanities clubs. For Townsend specifically, there's Fawn and Sing, which is dance and culture related. So there's a lot of options that you can choose.
That's awesome. Gabe and David, I'm going to ask just as you kind of think back into the past now. You're talking about where you are right now, what God has done for you now. And I'm curious if you can think back to the past, some memories you have. I see Ms. Nelson gives us a memory in her chat here. What do you guys remember from your time at FCS? Maybe our students will say, we did that. I remember that. What stands out to you from some of your times? Gabe, why don't you share first?
A lot of my memories were it's either related to the concerts, because often I'd stay after and I'd help them clean up. Mr. Austin would always ask our class to clean up because we had the biggest class at the time. So all the boys would go out and help him clean up the risers and clean up and vacuum and everything like that. But this one specific memory I had was, I think it was my 7th grade field day. I skipped chapel and I went with Mr. Austin to help set up. And I think it was me and 3 of the 8th graders. I think it was Terrence, Chris Roy, and I think it was Chloe. And we were in Mr. Austin's car. So we were at a stoplight. And if you don't know, outside of the 5 boroughs, you can turn right on a red light. So Mr. Austin was driving behind another car that was signaling right. And Mr. Austin beeped at him or honked at him and was like, "What are you doing? Like, it's not New York." And then he looked at us and he was like, "Wait." And then it was like 2 seconds after he looked at us and he realized, "Oh, wait, I'm with the kids from FCS, so we must be in New York." And we had a big laugh about that. But most of my memories are something like that. It's just like one-off interactions with the teachers.
Yeah, activities, events. And then for our students who may not know, remember Mr. Austin, he's the PE teacher who had been here for a long time. Before Mr. Penland, before Mr. Herrera was Mr. Austin. And he was a godly influence on all of us, I think, in a lot of different ways. And to his credit, he lived in New Jersey, so he was able to turn right on red most of his life. So that's probably why it was in the back of his mind. It's great. David, what stands out to you from your time back at FCS?
Same thing with Gabe, the risers especially, but also honors club trips. Those were very, very exciting and fun. Spelling bees, especially after the spelling bee, whenever we got our awards, or hopefully we got our awards, would go out to eat, and the Nat Geo Challenge. When me and Matthew and Grace stayed until like 7 p.m. to finish a project, as well as Mrs. Nelson mentioned, the robotics thing. When me and Carson stayed until 10 p.m. Fun times.
Fun times. So you did robotics here at FCS as well, and maybe that started to pique your curiosity, introduce you to some of the concepts that you did in high school, and then spelling bee you mentioned, and then honors club field trips. I wonder if you guys can think back to Halawasa, if you did that one, or Spruce Lake. David, I think your class was in. Did you do Spruce Lake or maybe not? I can't remember if your class was there.
I didn't go to Spruce Lake because I had like really bad allergies.
Okay, that's what it was. So lots of memories, and I would assume that you say you remember something from the classroom too. They may not stand out because all the classes kind of flow together to one long blur after a while. But at the same time, I'm sure that these were really meaningful things that helped you, and they prepared you and propelled you forward to where you guys are today. So our students are thinking through where they are right now. And I'll mention this to our students. You guys can go ahead and jump in, and there's a Q&A session. You can throw another question in this webinar if you want to add a question in. But one final question for Gabe and David is looking ahead to the future. So our students are looking ahead. They want to be prepared for high school. They want to be prepared for college and even beyond, right? What advice would you give to them with the time that they have now here at FCS? Gabe, go for it.
Well, I mean, obviously get good grades, but really just take this time to have fun and relax. Because in high school, you're not really going to get this much free time. Also, if you can, take the Algebra One Regents. Those will greatly help, because if you take the Algebra One Regents in middle school, you will be able to take pre-calculus junior year and an elective math course in senior year, which will help a lot for college.
That's really practical. So you're thinking through, enjoy time with your friends, definitely. I think some of our students would argue that they don't have much free time. Just with COVID, there are more Google Classroom assignments that are haunting them. And so that's a challenge, the work-life balance, right? And that may come up here next for you guys. But you also, I had another thought connected to what you just shared. You said in regards to the grades, remind me what you said the last thing? I'm sorry, Dave.
The Algebra One Regents? Yeah, you should really take those.
Thank you for that. And I was thinking of Mrs. Feld, right? Because she's really been pouring into our students a lot. She really drills us, and she's an excellent math teacher. What was the Algebra One Regents like for you, David? Was it extra difficult? Did you have to do extra prep work, or did you find that it came pretty quickly to you based on what you had here at FCS?
Personally, I didn't take the Algebra One Regents. The Algebra One Regents is mainly administered in middle school. So, I mean, I didn't really have the chance to take that. But, I mean, last year Regents were canceled, so I didn't get to take any Regents. So I can't really tell you how the experience of taking a Regent.
Fair enough. What was the Algebra One class like for you? Was it extra challenging? Did you find yourself almost yawning, like, oh, I've already done this, I could have skipped past this section?
Yeah, it was actually very, very easy, especially because when I had Mr. Sarabia for 8th grade math, he really prepared us for Algebra 1. So it was like an easy class. It was like a free class almost.
That's great. And maybe it's okay to have an easy class every once in a while in high school. We'll see. Gabe, why don't you share? What are some things you would really recommend to our students here at FCS right now?
I actually would agree with the Algebra One Regents thing. I didn't really do too much research going into high school because I was thinking to myself that I was going to move, and if anything, I'd go to my zoned high school anyways. So I remember when I went to high school, a lot of the more advanced students did take the Algebra One Regents because that was what the zone middle school did, and it was normal for like half the grade to take the Algebra One Regents. So I remember I skipped pre-calc to take like a college level calculus in college because I'm studying math, so I wanted to get ahead. But I think aside from that, yeah, try to get good grades, but do your best. If your best isn't an A, if it isn't a B, do your best. Don't stress over trying to make the hump. If you think you can, do it. But honestly, take your time to enjoy yourself. Don't try to stress yourself out too much with grades, because you're gonna look back on these times and like think you wasted them just trying to study maybe 4 or 5 hours a day, when realistically it's not as easy for you to get good grades. And definitely going to zone high school and not going to Townsend Harris where everyone is smart and like applied to get in. There are different types of people, and some people are more academically inclined. But if you're not, then it's okay. There are other things for you. Yeah.
Yep. And we see that in the career responses that our students gave. Some are interested in stuff that you need high grades for. Some aren't, and that's fine, right? God gifts us differently. And we've mentioned this often, but our definition of success is different from many schools' definitions of success. If a student has tried his or her best, they've grown in their faith, and they've honored the Lord with their efforts, that's a success. They don't have to go to a specialized high school. They don't have to go to a Ivy League prep school or anything else like that. They're honoring the Lord, and I'd much rather have his approval than anyone else's that way. Great. Well, I know many of our students had asked other questions. One more thing about just advice for our students. When you think the work-life balance, like David, you said it gets busier. That may scare our students. How have you guys found the ability? I'm assuming you found some balance. What have you guys found to help you kind of do the work and then balance that with other areas of life as you grow more independent with where you guys are now? Gabe, why don't you share with us first? Just life skills and things you've really developed with scheduling and independence, things like that.
I think it's very important to learn how you like to learn. So that will help with your work-life balance. A lot of not a lot, but some of my friends could like lock themselves in a room, study 4 hours a day, and like study like 3 hours before a test, and they'd be fine. Some of my friends like can't do that. They have attention span issues, or they just get bored really easily. I'm one of those people. So a lot of the ways I like to study was I was with like small group of friends, maybe 2 or 3 people, and that helped me be more social while studying. But they also kept me on track because I would get distracted very easily. Another thing would just be to make sure you keep track of your assignments. I know in FCS you had your assignment planner. I remember at least we bought them every year. And my dad always drilled in me to do it, and sometimes I wouldn't. But I realized in high school that you'd forget things. So try to write stuff down. If you don't want to write stuff down, I actually use Google Calendar as my assignment planner in junior and senior year. But just like write things down and find how you like to study and interact with other people.
That's great. And I'm reminded of the story of Ben Carson. So our 7th graders read his autobiography, Gifted Hands. And in that, when he was in college, he thought through, okay, I'd rather just read a book than listen to someone talk. And at that point, he sorted through what is the best study method for him, and he did it. And that's great for us students to think that through for themselves, how they best study, how they can best review material. Excellent. David, what advice would you give for kind of maintaining the balance? And I know your experience is more COVID focused. That's half of your high school career so far. So maybe you can give the 2 different dynamics and what it's been like for you.
Keeping track of assignments is a bit easier for COVID because a lot of the stuff is on Classroom and you just click a to-do list and then everything pops up. While in the classroom, the teacher says an assignment and you have to immediately remember to write it down on your planner or some piece of paper or whatever. But advice I would give would be pretty much similar to Gabe, but also manage your time properly. If you have a big project or if you have a musical piece or an art project to do, split it up into smaller chunks and space it out space it out into and do it different days, so that you can minimize stress and do a bit of each project per day.
That's great. And I remember Mrs. Blatt, our principal, often says, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time, 1 small chunk at a time. And you break it down using the to-do list. That's really helpful. Thank you guys for joining us. I'll mention we had one other panelist planning to join us, Melissa Seger. She's actually moved beyond the high school and the college years. And actually her maiden name is Seger. She's Mrs. Seger's daughter, but she's married It's another gentleman who actually attended the school too, and she is now working as a nurse in either ER or critical care here in the city. And so I was really eager to hear from her experience, what pointed her to working as a nurse, and even her reflecting back on her time at FCS and what helped to prepare her and point her in that direction. But she had other things come up. This is actually was going to be her lunch break. That's why we scheduled the webinar at this time. And she had something else come up, and that's reality. So hopefully we'll hear from her again in the near future. But I'm sure she would share some really helpful ideas about that too. So thank you guys for joining us so much. We're going to finish a little bit earlier, but I think our students are okay with that. They're so eager to get to their 5th period classes really soon. And we'll thank you for your time. So great, guys. Thanks again, and take care, everyone. We'll see you again soon.